Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is in listen-only mode besides myself and the panelists. So please use your control panel for any questions or comments. We will be fielding them throughout the webinar, and we'll address them at the end, which is a Q&A style format with our panelists. This webinar is live and will be recorded, so we will make sure to send out a recording link probably tomorrow, and you can listen to it at your pleasure and send it to any colleagues that may have missed the webinar. As you probably know, we have 3 industry experts as panelists today, so we're going to do something a little different. It will be a panelist forum type webinar. There will be lots of questions and engagement. So this will not be your traditional webinar where it's just going to be slides. We really do hope it will be engaging and the content will be really beneficial for your recruitment strategies. And then lastly, in case you missed it, we published a programmatic buying white paper last month. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, I encourage you to do so, which you can do at linkup.com/press. But we'll also send you out that link as well in a follow-up email, so no need to write that URL down. We'll make sure to get you that link tomorrow as well. Let me introduce myself. My name is Molly Mosley, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. I will make sure all of our panelists stay in order and that they provide you some great tools and content. So of course, I would really like to thank everyone for attending. We're really excited to bring these industry experts to the table to discuss one of the hottest topics right now in the industry, which is programmatic recruitment buying. So when you guys registered for this webinar, we asked you whether or not you currently use programmatic, and 40% of the people registered are using it to some degree in their recruitment efforts. This is actually a really encouraging number, and this percent's only going to continue to grow in the next year. And that really is one of the main reasons why we're hosting this webinar today. So, a couple quick agenda items. Our goal today is to provide you with an overview of programmatic, kind of outline how it works, how it will benefit your recruitment efforts. We have a couple case studies to walk through. We'll give you some tips on best practices. And we do want to leave you with where the industry is headed, what you should do to prepare with the shift of the industry. Our 3 panelists are experts on this webinar today, and they're here to share their insights and knowledge on programmatic. So a huge thank you to all 3 of you for taking the time to help educate us on this topic. So let me give you a little introduction on each one of our panelists. I would like to first welcome Chris Foreman, CEO and founder of Appcast. Chris and I actually met, I think, for the first time back in 2014 at HR Tech. And he's been in the recruiting space for over 20 years, developing software and tools that really essentially solve recruiter problems, such as Appcast. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hi, Molly. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Can you give a little background on Appcast before we get started?
Sure. Appcast was founded on January 1 of 2014 with the investment thesis of endeavoring to bring programmatic ad buying to recruitment advertising. So exactly, on point with, the theme of today's webinar. And the way that we've done that is we've built software that powers two solutions. The first one is a cost per applicant ad exchange that allows employers to use software to purchase recruitment advertising and only pay for it when someone applies through their applicant tracking system. And the second piece of product that we've got at Appcast is enterprise software that big ad agencies and big job boards use to optimize and manage their cost per click advertising. Year to date, we've grown pretty quickly. We've got about 250 enterprise clients now, and we're based right near Dartmouth College, so about 2 hours north of Boston.
Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot to kind of move that through. Here's that kind of snapshot of AppCast. We would also like to welcome Ken Clark, the CEO and co-founder of Recruitment on the call. Ken is an entrepreneur and innovator in this space. And in 2012, Recruitment launched a programmatic buying platform for the recruitment advertising industry. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Molly. Great to be here today.
Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about kind of the back end of Recruitix and what you do?
Sure. So Recruitix was started in 2012 and was the first programmatic platform in the recruitment industry. And it really came out from our own desire to connect with great talent and a company that we had started prior to Recruitix that was involved in the staffing industry. But ultimately, what we're about is helping companies connect to great talent. And the way we do that is we have two offerings. One is a web-based recruitment marketing analytics platform that identifies which advertising sources are most effective. And then we also have a programmatic buying platform that allows our clients to maximize the ROI on those sources. We work with essentially every major recruitment advertising vendor, whether it's a job aggregator or job board, and we help our clients optimize their CPC, CPA, or even their pay-per-post or slot strategy. And we work with some of the country's largest direct employers, staffing companies, and job boards as well. Our headquarters is in New York, and we also have our international offices headquartered in London.
Great. Thanks, Ken. And lastly, we have LinkUp CEO and President Toby Dayton as a panelist. And this might date us a little bit, but Toby and I have actually worked together for over 13 years. So he has a lot of insight within the market and has a strong background in the human capital space with a focus on labor market data and has been a key contributor on Bloomberg for the last 5 years. Hey, Toby, do you mind giving everyone a little overview on LinkUp and what we do?
Sure, and thanks, Molly, as well for organizing this event today, and thanks to our panelists. We're looking forward to a good discussion. So, as you mentioned, LinkUp is a job search engine, completely unique in the space in that we only index jobs from company websites. So what we do is go out every night, index right now about 3.5 million jobs from 50,000 company websites. And the index is updated daily, so the jobs are always current. And there are no duplicates in our search engine because we only index jobs from a single source, which is the company's website itself, the employer's website. So, and then lastly, we have eliminated what we call job pollution, things like fraud, scams, lead gen, things that typically really detract from the job seeker user experience. We've eliminated all of that. So what we do is provide job seekers a terrific user experience, which results in a very strong value proposition for our employer advertisers who are trying to source very high quality candidates at a very low cost.
Great, thanks. And thank you again, Chris, Ken, Toby, for being a panelist. So let's get started. Let's move on and really get to the roots of what programmatic is all about. Programmatic buying is not a new concept, but there's been a lot of buzz, as you've probably heard, in the last couple of years. So for the people who really kind of need a little 101, I'm going to provide a little background and definition here about programmatic. The term refers to the concept of technology that automates ad buying and placement and optimizes the advertiser's position to reach the best audience. So another way to think of it is an ad buying performed by computers or software. So not people. It's complete automation. What does programmatic, how does it work with recruitment ad buying? So how does it pertain to you as recruiters specifically? Well, it works just the same as programmatic ad buying. So kind of how we've defined it is it's recruitment ad buying that encompasses an array of technology to automate the buying placement of job openings on a predetermined network of job-related websites, such as LinkUp, on a pay-per-click or cost-per-app basis. Programmatic ad buying maximizes targeting efficiency by continually optimizing placement for the highest conversion rate at the job level. So think of you guys as becoming marketers. With programmatic recruitment advertisers, you're becoming these marketers who leverage the programmatic buying software to do the advertising for them. It's rule-based. So for employers with positions to fill, you can now program the rules for the types of candidates that you want to reach, and the software will place your online recruitment ad in front of those people. The advertisements can be text or display or really any type of ad, including the actual job from your company's career site. In its simplest form, I threw a lot of different kind of terms out there and a long-winded explanation of it. So in the simplest form, it's software-driven recruiting. So I'm going to kind of turn things over and open it up to discussion. Toby, could you kind of open things up and tell us how programmatic ad buying emerged? Like, where did this come from? We're just starting to hear about it. And where did it all stem from?
Yeah, it is a good place to start, and you mentioned it a little bit that our history goes back 13 years, and as a company we go back about 15 years. So we've been at this a long time, and so the way we think about really the history of programmatic is going back, unfortunately, that long time. It has been quite some time. Thinking about the transformation that has gone on in recruitment advertising, which really has mirrored what we've seen with a little bit of lag time, what we've seen in the traditional evolution of digital advertising. And so starting with back 2 decades ago with daily classifieds in the Sunday paper, transforming into job boards, which then led to the rise of thousands, tens of thousands of niche job sites and aggregators and search engines. So that evolution has really followed pretty closely in lockstep with the transformation of just traditional digital advertising, and I think that in and of itself has resulted in enormous amount of disruption and change in our industry. And then you add on top of that some of the changes in the economic models from a duration-based recruitment advertising over to performance-based advertising in the form of pay-per-click, and now, as we've alluded to, pay per applicant, where the results of those advertising marketing campaigns are really precipitated by and triggered by the cost of that. And then, so there has been really about what we see is, on average, about a 5-year lag between the changes that take place in digital advertising and when we start to see those in recruitment advertising. And I think the rise of programmatic has been pretty consistently in line with that time frame. You might be able to make the case, and I'd be curious to hear from Ken and Chris on the time lag, but it may be shortening a little bit, but it's been about a 5-year since we've seen the really dramatic rise in programmatic advertising, and it's expected this year that programmatic buying in the traditional digital will be about $15 billion, about $60 billion total digital spend, so about 25% adoption rate in traditional. So those are should be a pretty good indicators of the types of growth rates that we can see. This year, programmatic is expected to be in the traditional digital advertising up about 30% from the prior year. So very aggressive growth rates that we've seen. Again, I think we can anticipate those kind of growth rates going forward. So it really is, I think, in a lot of ways, it's a natural continuation of what we've seen in the past couple of decades in our industry, and we expect to see going forward pretty strong adoption rates over time. And that's really been facilitated, I think, in a lot of ways by strong technical innovation that we've seen over the last couple of years in recruitment advertising. And of course, it doesn't hurt either that the job market is improving, and the push for candidate sourcing is getting tougher and tougher, which drives a lot of innovation.
Thanks, Toby. Ken or Chris, do you guys have anything you want to add to kind of how recruitment ad buying emerged?
Sure. So I, Ken, I can just tell you personally with our company, for us, it really started with a question we wanted to answer, which was, how are the jobs at the time we, again, as I mentioned, we're a staffing company, how are the jobs that we were advertising on a CPC basis performing? And we, hadn't found a system that measured that in an accurate sense. So we built our own system. And then once you realize how your jobs are performing and how your ROI is either hitting its goals or not hitting its goals, the next thing you typically want to do is you want to change behavior, and you ideally want to do that without having people involved, and that led to the development of how we built our system. But agree with everything Toby said about where the industry is going. It is, I would agree, it's probably about 5 to 7 years behind the traditional ad industry, and what you're seeing happening now in the advancement in the last really 2 to 3 years is just industry's catching up with APIs and technology to really deliver for advertisers.
Yeah.
Great.
The only thing I'm going to add to that is that one of the things that's occurred in the last kind of 3 years is a much broader adoption of cost-per-click advertising in recruitment marketing. It used to be that the decision that the recruiting department would make would be, where am I going to place my job ads, and how many slots or postings am I going to buy? And fundamentally, the optimization of those, that ad spend happened quarterly, or it happened annually when you reviewed that performance. But last year, I think I got my numbers right, Indeed did $450 million worth of revenue globally. And when you add, and that's all in cost per click. And if you look at the other cost per click players that are growing very, very quickly and taking market share from duration-based job ad providers, I think one of the primary tactical drivers for people using software and data to try and optimize their spend, which is fundamentally what programmatic is about, is the fact that more of the recruitment spend in the United States is being pushed towards performance. And if you're buying on a performance basis, if you aren't managing it aggressively, you'll lose your shorts. I mean, that's a technical term. I don't expect everybody to follow it, but it can get really ugly really quickly. And so, I think that there's just a primary economic driver here where, talent acquisition professionals are saying, the game ain't the same as when I was just buying, 100 job slots at Acme job board.
Great. That's actually a really good kind of segue to this next section, and actually a couple questions that kind of came in. So I'm glad you touched on that, Chris. So as I mentioned, kind of with the definition, there's process and rules to programmatic. And there are really 2 categories of performance-based advertising used in the programmatic buying, like you mentioned. There's pay-per-click, so of course where employers are charged when a job candidate clicks on the job, and then now where the industry is slowly moving to is the pay-per-apply, so where employers are charged when a job candidate applies to the actual job. So these are 2 really crucial components to programmatic. So the process for programmatic recruitment ad buying really is kind of as follows, and then I'm going to open it up for the panelists to definitely elaborate on this. So the first thing you really need to think about is you need to identify the job that you want to target and provide exposure to. Then this is another really key part of programmatic is you're going to want to set the budget allocation as well as what they will pay for with each click or application. Then the recruiter is going to establish those rules. These include the details like demographics of their desired audience, their behaviors, their specific goals, and of course going back to the budget. Set your budget within the rules. Then you execute that buy. You allow the software or platform to initiate
where they're running around the office trying to figure it all out. Not very efficient, but theoretically it can be done. And all that you did was you unsponsored the easy-to-fill jobs once they got enough of clicks or applies. It forces the publishing community that you're sponsoring your jobs on to start to spend your money on the jobs that are harder to fill. They have to work harder, but they will do it because they want to actually, kind of earn your money. And so when you talk about the impact of rules-based buying, and there's lots of different, flavors of rules. Again, I'm just talking about one of them. It's about driving the outcomes that you really need to meet your business objectives from the budget that you've established. And so, we can dress it up with all sorts of big fancy names, but it's a pretty simple idea.
And it's essentially recruiting smarter, just giving you the more insights and intelligence of how your jobs are performing so you can better allocate budget, really.
That's it. And doing it not at some macro level where it's like this quarterly business review and trying to improve it, but it's at the job level every day, every hour, kind of trying to maximize that cost per click or CPA spend that you have. So it's taken it from 30,000 feet down to about 5 feet off the ground, and then using the tools that allow you to make that a practical thing for you to accomplish in your day.
Right, right. So I'm going to keep moving on here. I'm sure Ken and Toby, you have some great insights on that too, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of keep things moving here. So with any kind of new technology, there's always going to be your pros and cons. I've added a couple pros and cons to consider on this slide, but I would love you, Ken, in your opinion, really what are the pros to think about, and what are the negative implications that employers and recruiters should consider, if any, with programmatic?
Sure. So, just starting again from kind of the basic tenet, the programmatic ad buying is really about ensuring that you're always utilizing the advertising that's going to get you the highest return on your investment. And as we've all been talking about, the number one advantage of programmatic buying is that you are having software or computers, so to speak, automated systems, take all the grunt work, and you're leveraging what they're good at in terms of analysis and data to drive higher efficiency and ROI. So when you look at the pros, there really is no way that an individual or a manual process can compete with a programmatic platform. There's literally billions of events, that are being cataloged in different ways about the performance of jobs, and these rules are executing in real time against those rules. So as Chris was mentioning, one of the common rules around reallocating spend, almost any rule that you have works on a concept of like a if this then that pattern. So you can automate a rule to say if this occurs, then do something else. You could have a rule that is based on spending differently based on the age of a job. You can have a rule that works on bidding more or less aggressively based on the traffic to the job, any number of items like that. And that just can't be replicated without an automated system. So what that does is that provides an immediate cost savings and ROI improvement to the users of programmatic platforms. And you can look at a number of data points, whether it's conversion rates, whether it's aggregate data on similar ads for the same type of jobs, time of day, anything like that. On the con side, I'm not sure how to express what I'm going to talk about as cons, but I would say more just things that you have to be aware of, which, programmatic is a means to an end, and the end is that you want to get somebody hired. So thinking that programmatic will solve all of your problems is, I'd say, probably not the perspective I would take. It's a method and it's a strategy that you have within your toolkit as a recruiter. The second thing is programmatic typically won't be as effective for you as its potential if you don't have a clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. A programmatic platform really is only as good as the goals that you feed it. So if you don't clearly know what you're trying to accomplish, whether that's expressed as driving volume or driving applicants or hitting a specific goal, it's difficult to hit the potential of programmatic. And then the last thing is more of just an awareness, is that programmatic needs data to work. So if you're not getting enough traffic to your jobs, the computers can only do so much. You need a sample set. So you need to make sure you've allocated enough budget to spend to ensure that you get the results that you're looking for. Just looking at the slide here, in terms of inappropriate site placement and fraud, I think the systems of everyone that's represented on this call actually do pretty good job of ensuring that the jobs are being posted on the right sites, and there's a lot of work in the industry ensuring that there is minimization of click fraud and things like that. So I think those aren't as much of a con as as I would bring out for the platforms.
Yeah, Ken, I think that's a good point, and I would agree with that. I think those continue to be sort of raised on everyone's radars because of some of the things that are going on in traditional digital programmatic advertising. The one other challenge, and I'd put this on both the pro and the con, is that it is a change. It requires people to change the way they think think about their strategic recruitment advertising. But that change, it is disruptive, but it is really critical, and it does have huge payout in terms of the benefits that it brings about. So it is, I'd put that one in as sort of on each side of the ledger.
Great. There's a lot of good questions kind of coming in here too, so I'm going to sprinkle them kind of throughout. And actually one question that's a good transition from these pros and cons is who else is involved? So we've got Appcast on the call, we've got Recruitix, we've got LinkUp, but besides the employer, who are the players that make it work? So I'm just going to give a little background of the two kind of main elements. So we have the providers. So they're the ones that develop the programmatic software and manage the programmatic recruitment ad buying campaigns. So that would be Appcast and Recruitix. So they're the engines behind programmatic. Then there are the publishers. So the publishers, on the other hand, display the ad, providing the audience and the clicks. So there are numerous publishers available for you to use in a programmatic campaign, so more than just LinkUp. And that software then monitors and optimizes which publishers are used on how successful they are to that campaign. So of course, yes, we are, as LinkUp, a key publisher, but when you use programmatic, that's one of the benefits, is that your jobs get pushed out to other great sites as well. So again, it's just really smart recruitment, and the system will optimize your campaign based on performance. So Chris, can you give more background of kind of where you guys fit into the picture, how you work with us, other job sites, to really make programmatic work?
Sure, and we'll get right into that. One thing I just want to kind of connect what we just talked about in terms of the ecosystem with the last kind of discussion around pros and cons. One of the things that Ken hit it exactly on the head. Programmatic is not an end to itself. Recruitment advertising isn't an end to itself. It's about outcomes. And one of the things I wanted to make sure that we all focus on was, in fact, the outcome is to hire great people. If you're not spending a lot of money, or you're not, working with at least a couple of CPC providers, if you're only working with one of them, you're probably not a great profile for the tools and capabilities that we're talking about here, because there's a programmatic takes work. It takes spending money on technology. It takes mind share. It takes brain. It's not snap your fingers and all of a sudden, rainbows and unicorns start appearing. So I just wanted to make sure that that I got that off my chest. That like
as much
most
as we
things,
all want those things.
Yeah, I know, but you know, like most things in life, you get what you work for, and it takes some work. In terms of the ecosystem, you know, we've got two technology products at Appcast. One of them is this ad exchange that allows employers to purchase, you know, recruitment advertising on a cost per applicant basis. And then we've got ClickCast, which is a CPC optimization engine that is, you know, used by ad agencies and job boards. And I don't mean to speak for Ken, but, you know, fundamentally their technology platform is kind of like ours, is it sits in the middle, and it's a blackjack deal. You know, the jobs come in, the jobs go out to where they're supposed to go. Somebody's got to count the cards, and somebody's got to figure out who's winning and losing, and, you know, kind of adjust things as it goes. And so in terms of the role that platforms, you know, like ours play, it is one part measurement, it is one part optimization, and it's one part bidding to facilitate, you know, kind of the to communicate what you're willing to pay on certain jobs based on how they're performing, and an optimization strategy that's been defined. So it's interestingly, in the recruiting technology space, there's been this category of technologies out there called job distribution for a long time. But you know what Appcast and ClickCast and Recruitix are doing are fundamentally different than job distributions, which are more like postmen delivering a job to the right place. This is much more real time. It is, you know, rules-based optimization, and it's bidding.
Ken, do you have anything to kind of add to that? That was a great explanation, Chris.
Yeah, I thought Chris did a great job there. You know, ultimately, you know, where our platforms fit in is it's about measuring and optimizing. You know, in the case of Recruitix, we are not a source of hire or of traffic or candidates. We are helping companies identify what sources work best and then getting the most out of those sources. You know, one of the things we do as well is we also provide some agency services for companies that want help trying to figure this landscape out. But we offer, you know, a platform as well, just depending on what the client is looking for. And, you know, everybody wants something different. But I thought Chris did a great job explaining the landscape.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is and I think, you know, Molly said it and Chris said it, you guys have, it's been mentioned, is that we definitely, as a publisher, we very much see ourselves in the best practices as part of a diversified mix of media spend and budget. That is, I think, very key, and what this software does is optimize that diversification to its maximum. So it really, that does work very well. And the other piece that I'd add in is that recruitment ad agencies obviously play a role as a player in this space, and they can be very constructive and helpful in part of this process, and a part of it. They don't have to be, it's not required, but there are ways to work productively with agencies in this mix. So I'd make sure we bring them into that. But again, it's not a must to be using programmatic, leveraging it.
And Chris said something really great. You know, at the end of the day, everything that we all have in common, whether you're an employer, a publisher, a provider, is that the end goal is just to hire great people. And this is just one element to that to help you succeed in that. I've actually asked the panelists to provide a couple slides on, you know, we all want, you know, that data and analytics and proof. When you're going to switch to try something new, you want to hear about stories of what it's doing and how it's helping other employers possibly like you. So let's start with Recruitix. Ken, why don't you share us this case study that you prepared for us?
Great, thank you. So you know, this is a client. One of our clients is one of the largest healthcare staffing clients in the country, and you know, they had a surge of open positions that they needed to fill. And ultimately, they were trying to drive an increase in the number of qualified candidates they add to those positions, because in the case of a staffing company, the more applicants you get, statistically, that will drive more revenue for the business and grow the business. So, directly strategically important to the business. When we began speaking with them, the challenge they had is they simply didn't have a good understanding of how their current pay-per-click CPC advertising was working. They were spending significant amount of money a month on their campaigns. And so the first thing we did is, as we do with every one of our clients, is we conducted a 30-day benchmark. And essentially what we do is we just see what's happening. And there were a couple things that we saw. First was almost 50% of their budget was spent on jobs that were generating 2% of the applicants, which obviously a big disconnect in the expectation of what their results would be. The second thing was the CPA, or the cost per applicant, for those jobs on their targeted jobs was over $300 what the CPA was on their lower priority jobs. And so they were essentially spending too much money on the jobs that they really need to attract candidates to. Last two items, the jobs that were converting well weren't getting enough traffic to drive applicant flow. All of these issues are similar to some of the topics we've been talking about today, and the campaigns for their lowest priority jobs were eating up budget. So what we did is we built a optimization strategy that addressed all of those issues, and it essentially ensured that the jobs that needed traffic and that were highest priority for the company were getting the ad spend, and any low priority jobs we were either spending less or not spending at all. And within 30 days, terrific results. They had a 130% increase in their high priority leads, $214 decrease in their CPA for their high priority leads, and a $10 decrease in their overall CPA. The other big impact was after 90 days, those numbers increased even further, and they had much better results. Last point here, what happened with this client is what we see often is when clients see the impact of programmatic buying on their campaigns, there's not a reduction in budget, but there's typically an increase in budget and ad spend because they invest more in sources that are working. And ultimately, in this case, for the staffing client, that directly impacted their bottom line. So it was a great result all around.
And you mentioned, Ken, kind of putting the strategy together for them. One question that kind of came in is, one thing that could be very daunting is trying to figure out how to get the rules right. So what would you recommend for employers who are looking to start introducing programmatic in their plans next year? Is how do they go about creating that strategy? What are some tips that you could rattle off maybe that could get them going to really figure out, if I need to set these rules, how should I create the strategy that really supports those rules?
Sure. So the way that our company works is we provide services to help companies determine what their goals are. If I go back to what I said earlier, it's about hiring, hiring great people. And so our experience is most companies want to take advantage of the programmatic benefits and efficiencies. Oftentimes less interested in getting in the weeds on, what's the rule model that works. So the way that we handle that is we generally will have a series of calls with our clients, and we'll understand what the goals are, and we help our clients craft that strategy. We found that is a pretty good strategy for for how we interact with our clients.
So what would you say, Chris, to kind of that? Like, how would you tell an employer to start crafting a strategy to help with figuring out the rules?
Yeah, I mean, Ken's got it exactly. I mean, it's a discovery call. You know, in terms of there are a few common things. You know, and most people know their pain. They may not be able to articulate it crisply in a statement of this is how I want programmatic to solve it, but fundamentally they're going to have you know, we're not getting enough applicants on key jobs. They are spending too much money on the wrong jobs, or you know, they feel like they are generally spending more money than they should for the outcomes that they're getting. And so, you know, being able to get job level data around traffic from the job and the number of applies from the job, and that's something, at least the applies at the job level is something that most ATSs can pop out. A lot of them can provide reports on the number of times the job has been viewed, but it's not, you know, Ken's company and our company make software that allows that data very easily to be seen, you know, over a 7, 14, 30-day cycle. And so, you know, that's some of the baseline data that you capture, and then you start to eyeball it and talk about what their objectives are. And, you know, again, there's no rocket science to this. It's a relatively standard, you know, kind of solutioning session.
Okay, thanks. So Chris, why don't you walk through your case study with everyone?
Sure. So we talked a little bit in terms of which case study to use here, and we actually thought that there probably was no better way to ensure that we you know, were able to communicate some of the most important concerns to our customers, which is quality applicants, than talk about the American Wedding Group. So what AWG does is they are the kind of leading national provider of wedding photography, videos, and disc jockeys. So, like, you're going to get married, and you go online, like most people do for everything, and you Google disc jockey. Well, American Wedding Groups will come up, and they represent an online marketplace for you to go find, you know, folks that can come work at your wedding. And their business is they recruit wedding photographers, videographers, disc jockeys, you know, vet them, and then put them into this database of available employees that can be hired. And so talk about needing to actually get the hiring right, because if you hire the wrong person, it's going to ruin somebody's wedding, and that's a really bad thing to do. So American Wedding Group is a JobBite client. They deployed AppCast, which is our cost per applicant ad exchange platform, in 2016, and they took they ran the system to identify which jobs they were lacking applicant flow on, and then they wrote a rule that said if we don't have enough applicant flow on a particular, you know, job or job family, go ahead and sponsor that job for X amount of dollars per application all the way through JobBite. So they ran a trial, and it worked extraordinarily well, and they're now a day-in, day-out client. But during the trial, our platform drove our click-to-apply rate was 22% higher than any other source that they had. And this is kind of a geeky thing, but it's somewhat material, because we found that there's a relationship between click-to-apply rate, meaning people that look at your job and then click to apply, and quality. Sources that have a higher click-to-apply rate tend to generate better quality candidates. And so the platform, you know, again, using software and data, optimized to putting AWG's jobs in exactly the right place at the right time in front of the right people. We got 53 hires for them on $600 worth of spend during the first 30 days. And, you know, I was blown away when I saw those numbers. And so it was an incredibly powerful and great trial for them. And the cool thing is that it integrates seamlessly with their recruiting workflow. If you talk to the recruiters at AWG, they don't necessarily know, you know, whether a candidate is from AppCast or not, They just know that candidates are flowing into their funnel and getting recruited at a higher level. And so, that's the neat thing is that with the exception of the folks that purchase recruitment media at AWG, this was completely invisible to job seekers. It was completely invisible to the recruiters at AWG, and they, both sides just kind of had a normal recruiting transaction. And so there we go.
Great. So now we kind of heard from the provider standpoint. So I asked Toby to put together one of our case studies from a publisher standpoint, so kind of where we see quality metrics and where we fit into programmatic.
Yeah, so I think in this case, which was a large transportation client of ours that we've been working with for a number of years, and it really echoes a lot of what's been said on previously by Chris and Ken in terms of needing to or being able to leverage the importance of leveraging data and identifying pain points to set goals for a campaign. And in this case, with this client, we had been working with them for a number of years and delivering applicants that were performing very well against their diversified mix of media that they were leveraging. So we were delivering applicants at about a cost of about $38 per applicant, and they were really trying to source the full spectrum of drivers, experienced drivers, trainees, recent graduates. So that's a blended rate there, and they were pleased with our performance, but they knew overall that was a little bit higher than what they felt they should be or what they were seeing in terms of industry averages. So they had a goal of reducing that cost per applicant down as much as they could, and so they, with us, began a programmatic campaign earlier this year and generated fantastic results. They were able to, in a relatively short amount of time, literally in the first month of getting this programmatic campaign up and running, they were able to lower their average cost per applicant down to just over $14, which is about a 60% cost reduction. So really dramatic results pretty quickly. So the quantity there, the 126 applicants was again very much well within their target goals. So again, I think just another example in a very challenging industry with very tight, high demand, they were able to see very, very dramatic results through the use of programmatic.
Great, thanks, Toby. For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of start moving things along pretty quickly here. I do want to leave some time for Q&A at the end. Everyone is really engaging well, so I appreciate that. We have a lot of great questions. So I want to just talk a couple minutes here about some best practices. Really with figuring out any kind of new method of recruitment, it's hard to climb that learning curve. Another thing that's really hard is getting people to buy into it and developing that strategy like we talked about. And even with all the benefits of programmatic, there's still a few things that you as the employer can do to facilitate better responses and drive that cost per hire down. So I've got a couple best practices here that I'm just going to go through really quickly. One is use job groupings. So group your positions. I think either Ken or Chris was touching on this. You want to group them by difficulty to fill. So you're going to want to invest more in those that are difficult to fill than you would on some of those easier positions. So really think about your target CPA at the job level. Mobile, when buying mobile programmatic ads, feature jobs that have easier and shorter applications. So if possible, leverage plugins to fill in some of the information for the applicant. Any job that you list on mobile should really have a short and reduced application process to work with the device. So always keep in mind the user experience to really help you get those conversions. Also, you're going to set those goals and strategies. That's kind of becoming a common theme throughout the webinar. It's really important to set those for programmatic. So when you're adjusting your strategy, be sure to change one thing at a time so you kind of glean better data about what's working and what isn't. obviously one thing about programmatic is leverage the data. Let it tell you how your strategy should evolve. You know, I'm going to open it up here. Ken, do you want to touch on any of the best practices?
Sure. There's a couple just quick points I want to make. I know we're running a little short on time here. I just want to reiterate something Molly just said. This is a data-driven process, and you should not enter it with a bias. You want to let the data tell you what decisions to make or what's actually happening. And so as I mentioned before, the first thing you absolutely want to do is set a baseline for where you are before you start using programmatic, so that you can measure the impact of programmatic. And you can see that in all the 3 case studies that we just heard about. Every one of the folks that are represented on this call all started with an understanding of where the client was before programmatic started, so that we could show the results of the strategy. You know, just emphasize again, setting a goal. The goal could be to optimize a specific set of jobs to a CPA. It could be simply setting a budget to start. It could be to drive more applications within a budget. Whatever the goal is that you want to start with, you need a goal. And if you have a goal, you can then measure the goal again, getting back to the data. And then the last point I just want to make is you have to recognize that there's a learning and testing period. And if you think about all the different things that can impact the effectiveness of your online advertising, it's probably more than you might intuitively recognize or think of. You have, you know, how effective are your landing pages? How many jobs are you actually sending out to the different advertising vendors? You have what are your budgets based on your jobs? You have quality of your job descriptions. Most times recruiters don't think of their job descriptions as content, but in a way what we're doing with job ads is we're content marketing. And if you have good job descriptions, you have good job conversion rates. So the reason I bring that up is there is a learning period, and once the data starts flowing in, you can easily zero in on the aspect of your strategy that might need to be tweaked. And it might be that you need better job descriptions, or it might be that your application process is too cumbersome. Those things all drive a lot of value in the programmatic process once you've identified them.
One quick thing that I'd add to that, I think that's a great summary, is that in terms of setting those goals and strategies, and there was an earlier question in terms of helping somebody get started, one of the things that we do often with our clients is figure out, and we can provide industry benchmark, and I'm sure I know it's the case with both Recruitix and Appcast as well. That industry benchmark can oftentimes be a great place to start, and we work with hundreds and hundreds of clients across every industry, and have got a wealth of data there. So even if it's not at your fingertips in your own situations, there are resources there to start to get at least to that starting point of what should our goals be, at least from a CPA standpoint.
So just to kind of wrap things up, and then we'll take some questions that have been coming in. And a good question to really do that is, where is the industry headed? Programmatic really started in the whole marketing and digital space, and according to eMarketers, advertisers will purchase 55% of digital ads using programmatic buys next year. So just with that, and recruitment just follows shortly behind that area, Toby, where do you think the industry is headed, and what can employers do to prepare for this huge shift in recruitment?
Yeah, it really is a critical question, obviously, that is top of mind, I think, for all of us and everybody in the industry, and particularly large employers that are facing an increasingly challenging labor market and the sourcing candidates. I think that, as we've hopefully demonstrated, and I think as we'd all agree on the panel, programmatic is going to continue to be a very, very critical part of people's overall recruitment ad spend. And for obvious reasons. I think that the ROI is very strong. We've talked about the pros. I think they are very compelling, and we're going to see continued gains in this over time. It is the next step in the evolution of this industry, and I think that is going to happen. I guess in some ways, I'd be curious for Ken and Chris, as you guys are working through it, and we've got some of the things that we're working through as this technology and these platforms come online, and as the ecosystem overall is adapting, and employers are increasingly looking at and leveraging programmatic. What are those obstacles or challenges that you guys see? What has to happen in the next couple of years to see the kind of adoption rates that we're seeing in traditional digital advertising? And what would you point to as some of those bigger kinds of hurdles that are going to have to be overcome?
Well, this is Chris. The hurdles are kind of the classic hurdles of any type of technology, disruptive, kind of technology adoption. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. The results, whether you look at the numbers that Ken shared, or I shared, or you shared, Toby. I mean, the impact of using software and data to optimize performance-based recruitment spending is immense. Period. So, just like it took a long time for the traditional job boards to take a bite out of the the newspaper, just classified business, it's going to take time, and it took time for CPC, performance-based advertising, to catch hold in recruitment. It's going to take time for this to go as well. The hurdles are the same. They're understanding, their comfort. Folks pretty much don't go into HR and recruitment because they like to hang it out there. This is, a more conservative corporate culture when it comes to making decisions, and it's gonna take time. But don't mistake that it's you think that it's not going to continue to grow. I think that we are going to find the majority of companies in America are using an iteration of programmatic ad buying technology within 24 months.
What would you say to that, Ken?
Yeah, so one point I'd add, agree with everything that's been said so far, is if I take a step back a bit from programmatic, I think what you're going to see with employers, staffing companies, really anyone that is buying recruitment advertising, is the rise of a role that I'll just call the recruitment marketing function within an organization. And if you say, where have we been over the last however many years, is the recruitment ad budget is typically managed as a cost center, and there's it's probably tracked the effectiveness via Excel spreadsheets. And by the virtue of just the speed that technology is moving, recruitment marketing and recruitment advertising is not a cost center, but it is a business driver. And acquiring talent, great talent, is probably if not the number one, it's got to be the top two priorities of any organization for its success. And so what we see is forward-thinking companies now have a recruitment marketing function that is separate from HR, separate from a recruiter, but it's someone that's thinking about how you can maximize your recruitment advertising dollars and your recruitment marketing strategy to drive great talent into the company. And so I think outside of all the technical advances, which are absolutely going to be happening in the next couple of years, I think you're going to see a larger awareness and emergence of recruitment marketing as a core function within most companies.
It's a good point. One thing in terms of advice for employers, and Ken and Chris are obviously more vested in programmatic. We're a little bit more agnostic on cost per click, cost per applicant, programmatic or not. And so as a little bit more unbiased view, my one piece of advice to employers is to jump in. It is going to happen. The ROI is there. You learn by testing it out, trying. There are going to be challenges along the way and hiccups, but the ROI is there, and the companies I think that jump in and embrace the change and take advantage of what's there and learn and climb that learning curve earlier on are going to be the ones that are really going to continue to set the pace for the industry. So again, Chris and Ken might be a little more humble, but and Chris alluded to it a little bit, but it is my one piece of advice is that this can be a very significant part of an overall recruiting strategy, and I think it is one that is going to have very strong benefits for companies that are in a position to leverage that.
And that really segues great into the biggest takeaway, of the webinar, and every one of you guys have mentioned it, is that programmatic recruitment is here to stay, and it's growing fast, and it is becoming the future. So no matter where you fall in the spectrum of kind of your knowledge of it, I mean, you're taking the first step is by coming here today and educate yourself. So my recommendation is, get all the tools and education on the actual the software. Reach out to Chris, someone at LinkUp, someone at Recruitix, contact Ken at Recruitix. So educate yourself, then come up with an internal strategy. Get people internally to buy in, understand it is the biggest thing that you're going to want to do with that. And then try it would be the final step. With programmatic, it's performance-based. So again, being the biggest thing with performance-based is you're only paying if you're getting candidates of what is delivered. So with that, I am going to open it up for a couple questions. We have hit that hour mark, so I really only have time for a couple, but if we don't address yours specifically, we will follow up with you individually and connect you with the right people to get you those answers. Again, we want this to be as educational for you and get you the tools that you need. So the questions that were coming in have been great, and they have been all over the spectrum of, of how it works, what we can do to get started. One question that I thought was really interesting that, I'll ask Chris is, you touched a little bit on the quality of candidates, and that's one thing we're hearing quite a bit too at LinkUp is, more employers are looking at the candidate flow, but who's sending me the quality applicants? So can you explain how programmatic kind of measures that quality candidate and what insights it can provide the employer?
Sure. I went to computer camp when I was in 8th grade, and one of the things that they taught me, during that wonderfully socially awkward time was garbage in, garbage out. So if you put in good data, you put in good code, you get good insights out or good software out, and the opposite is true if bad stuff goes. So with regards to optimizing to quality applicants, the first thing that you need to be able to do is you need to be able to bring the insight around source-based performance of an applicant back into your buying strategy. So it's not just good enough to say, hey, we got an applicant from source A. You need to be able to feed back into your buying platform at some interval that applicant was DQ'd, that applicant made it to the hiring manager's desk, that applicant got hired. Now, at AppCast and at ClickCast, we spend a lot of time kind of focusing on the right way to do that. And one of the things that we believe firmly in is that it's very, very hard unless you are a company of immense scale to optimize your recruitment media bidding strategy on the hire. There's lots of reasons why people hire or don't hire someone. Budgets go away, hiring managers weird, can't pay reload. Your media sources, your publishers, should be evaluated on whether or not they're driving applicants that are qualified, get through your recruiting organization, and make it to the hiring manager's desk. So we focus on what's called a QCPA, a quality cost per applicant. And what's neat about that is that it actually is something that you can measure much quicker than waiting for the latency of a hire. And so you need to have methodologies and, in many cases, technologies that can start to bring, that status data about applicants into your software, and then your software can start to use that information to learn, okay, for these types of jobs, for this employer, we're seeing a higher quality score coming from these particular sources. And then you can start to integrate that into your bidding strategy.
Okay, great. Ken, I'm going to ask you a question here. One question that came in is, where does programmatic fit in for small companies versus large companies? Is there, a piece of the pie for both, or is programmatic only really beneficial for the large employers who have, 1,000+ job openings?
Sure, it's a great question. So I would say programmatic is something that hits really companies of all sizes. Something that we didn't talk about today, but I'll use LinkUp as an example, is most of the sources of traffic, imagine Appcast, Recruitix weren't even on this call, most of the sources of traffic are also using programmatic methodologies in how they deliver candidates today. If you're working with a performance-based provider, and obviously there's many of them, programmatic methodologies are being used by those providers to deliver candidates to you as a small business. So you may not even realize it, but you're using programmatic probably if you're working with any of the job search aggregators right now. They all have certainly CPC methodologies, but anyone using a CPA methodology, whether it's a Jobs to Careers or it's LinkUp or it's any of the other CPA vendors, they're all using programmatic. So short answer is yeah, absolutely. The scale of how much you engage with programmatic based on where your budget is, it's just, there's different levels of scale that you can engage in, but absolutely room for small business, medium business, or large business.
Good to hear. I'm gonna end one last question here with Toby, and it's gonna be a hard one for him. And of course I would love your insights on this, Chris and Ken. One of our attendees asked, what percent of recruiters are currently using programmatic? It's interesting because we asked for the people attending, which was 40%, but just from your expertise, Toby, what would that be percent now, and what do you think that percent would be next year?
Yeah, I think, in some ways 40% is a good number. I mean, that is obviously a little bit of a skewed sample because it's probably, either people who are aware of it, curious about it, have heard about it, want to learn more about it. So it may not be a great sample, but it is, I think, at the front end of larger companies who are pushing their strategies and are keenly aware of emerging technologies, that percentage is going to be high. And 40% I think is probably a pretty good benchmark there today. If you look at companies of all sizes across the country, I would say it's probably half of that, 20%-ish, but growing quickly. And Chris mentioned it early on, the rise of adoption of cost per click and performance-based advertising. I can still remember it wasn't that long ago, 2-3 years ago, when we were still spending a lot of time explaining to a lot of companies what cost per click was, and that has quickly changed. And I think in some ways programmatic is probably going to follow a similar pace where within a year or two, I would guess that the vast majority, certainly 2/3 of the industry, will be well aware of programmatic within a pretty short time frame, and again, it will quickly become one of the driving factors in people thinking about their allocated spend and their overall budget.
What would you guys say, Chris? What would you say is the percent right now?
Single digits.
Single digits.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Ken?
As far as today, if I say, a company that understands they're using programmatic, in my comments before, notwithstanding that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, I'd probably agree with Chris. I think it's probably less than 10%.
Okay, great. Well, that will kind of wrap things up for our webinar. Thank you so much, Chris and Ken and Toby, for being our industry experts on today's webinar. And thank you all for attending. We will be sending out that email within the next day with a link to the recording as well as that white paper. But please feel free to reach out to any of the panelists or myself for more information. Thanks again.
Thanks, Molly.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.